All right. Okay, folks. So today we'll study in brief concepts of inter-process communication. Okay, note that in this course we are focusing a lot on process and threads, and we'll spend considerable time on inter-process communication, which is similar to inter-thread communication, and then followed by shared memory. Okay, and then we'll move into I'm sorry, inter-process communication. There are two: message passing and shared memory, and then we pass on to synchronization methods. Okay, how do we synchronize various threads and processes, right? So this is so we'll go in detail about it, and later us see, because we have already covered in great detail memory, virtual memory and cache memory, because so now we are saving almost like 7-8 lectures for that. And similarly we have gone into good details of IO. So maybe we'll be doing little bit of IO, and then after IPC is complete, or IPC synchronization, we will move into scheduling, and later on we'll get into file systems. Okay, or maybe file system before scheduling, so and then we'll at the end we'll study a little bit about security, and also we'll read little bit about distributed OS. All right, or maybe cloud computing. All right, and I will need a few extra classes because I will be taking 1 week's leave sometimes in November. There's a possibility that I might have to take leave, so I will try to finish syllabus early. Okay, any question, any input?
Sir, I had a question from last lecture. In the pthread.detach that function, it tells the library that it won't join another thread, so we immediately release the resources, right? So I got confused that it tells the library that it won't join someone, but that doesn't mean that some other thread will not join this thread to get the data.
So this situation may end up in I mean, for example, if thread is blocking for something, so thread is waiting for other thread to complete, and thread does detach operation, this is a wrong programming that you have done, because who has done the programming? Ultimately you have done the programming, right? And what is the logic for detach? See, these are primitives given to you to do appropriate programming. There might be scenario where thread has to detach. Okay, but that doesn't mean that program logic does not have to take care of all these scenarios. Okay, think of situation when you nice that you are thinking about it, but get into detail and find out what scenarios it has to detach, and then what happens if other process waiting and this process this other thread detaches itself, right? Just think of it. See, all these primitives are given doesn't mean that you have to use in inappropriate manner. Okay, think about it, and then you will get the answer. All right. Okay, so today we'll study a little bit about inter-process communication, and we'll focus on message passing. But as we usually do, we'll look at the big picture first and try to get into details. Okay, and a lot of message passing primitives you have already done in the networking course, like RPC you would have done, and so on, right? So these are all known to you, like socket programming that you have done. In some sense, is that high level primitive available to you. So we'll not go into great implementation details, but focus of today is only at the top level, is concepts around IPC. Okay, all right, and implementation detail may vary from OS to OS, right? And Linux may have some different ways of implementing these, while Windows may have totally different and old OSs do it differently, right? But basic concepts remain the same. Okay, all right. Okay, so today's discussion I have taken largely from these two books. This is also this new book which, wow, I have not in fact written this by, okay, I will give it later. Okay, there's one more book. Anyway, I'll let you know. Just a minute. Okay, I will let you know. Okay, so we'll cover the following. We'll look at what are the issues when we executed processes concurrently. Okay, now note that there is a, when we say word process, you can also think of in terms of thread. Few issues might be different, but you know, when we use inter-process, inter-thread communication or inter-process communication, largely these are the issues, same issues. But in general, when we, okay, many scenarios, process and threads, you know, sharing information could be different. For example, shared memory, etc. We'll look at these specifically. Okay, and we'll look at some of these message passing concepts like synchronous versus asynchronous, blocking versus non-blocking, direct versus indirect communication, mail boxes and ports, and message format. Okay, so this is the structure of Linux OS. Okay, all right. So we have learned a lot of things by now. In our computer architecture course, we have learned about this. Okay, almost everything. Then a few things may confuse you, like, okay, we have not gone into that level of details of design like terminal equipment and network adapter. Some aspect we have looked into it. And then we have also kind of studied this almost fully. Okay, this part of network, etc., you have possibly studied in not OS related part, but networking stack. In fact, OS also has networking stack built into it. And then you would have also studied in computer networks course. Right now we are here in the process management part, right? So we have seen how we can create process and how various process can synchronize with each other using join operation. Okay, and we have also studied threading. Process management in general consists of both process as well as thread. All right, we will study file systems, device drivers, etc. little later. System call concept also we have studied. All right. Okay, next comes is concurrent execution of processes. We know the concurrency is necessary in a computer system, right? So multiple processes execute concurrently. Okay. So now this concurrence, proper execution of concurrency. Okay, when there are concurrent processes, we may think that processes are independent, but you know, they mostly, you know, these processes may have to communicate with each other or synchronize with each other, right? So there are two things which are important. First is communication among processes or threads. So these are two processes. There's a possibility these are totally independent processes, though they can run concurrently, one after other or interleaved manner, and may not interact with each other, which is fine. But they may yet compete for a resource. Some resource may be there, say for example, a printer. Yet they may, or they may be cooperating processes where they may be sharing something with each other. Okay. Okay, so there is a need for communication and also need for synchronization. Okay, among each other, right? Okay, we have seen the race issue. Okay, all these issues need to be handled by synchronization mechanism. So we will now, in next few lectures, we will study first IPC, inter-process communication. Later on, we will look at synchronization issues. Synchronization, how we can synchronize different processes. Okay, so note that processes are competing process, or these are independent process. They, however, they don't have anything to share with each other. Okay, they don't want to pass message or use shared memory for communication, but they may compete for a resource, as we have just seen, like for a printer or disk or file. Okay, so now if this is a shared resource, there must be some way of sequencing their operation. All right, who will do first, and till the time maybe second process will wait, and so on. Okay, so there is also the other set of process, cooperating process, where together they complete a task. Okay, this is P1 process, P2 process. P1 maybe get blocked, it will get for some time, get information for second process and continue execution, right? So they change information among each other. Okay, and this is required for various tasks, right? Like they may jointly maybe executing some some main task, which will subdivide in subtask, and different threads may execute different parts of the task. So this may be required for parallelism or speed up, may be also required for information sharing among the processes, for modularity reason or convenience reason. So it could be anything, right? So cooperating processes are those which share information with each other. All right. So now when processes interact, so there are issues, okay, that we need to solve. Then we'll have to find out how processes interact, how processes share information with each other or pass information to each other, right? So now, and then processes while execution must use some primitive for that or some system calls. It could be these instructions could relate to where interaction is required for other person, could relate to system call, or it may call as a system call, or it could be some other primitive. Okay, in order to pass information. So other important thing is that the processes don't get into each other's way. I mean, there must be some way of controlling their access of some shared resource, as we have seen earlier in case of printer. Okay, if two processes are competing with each other to do printing, okay, there may be scenarios that one page of first process is printed and second page that is printed correspond to second process, right? There must be a way that a process must be blocked until first process operation is over, or some other way. Okay, other example is that two competing processes are trying to reserve a airline seat in a flight, and this is the last seat, right? So there must be some way of synchronization between them. And then same thing is about the processing need for proper sequencing, which basically these 2 points are related to each other. And many of these issues are also applicable to threads. Okay, so we have seen there are 2 issues required for interaction among processes. First is communication. Okay, in case of processes, we call it IPC, inter-process communication. And second is called synchronization, where processes need to synchronize to enforce mutual exclusion. So there is a resource or part of the something which we call it critical section, which, or maybe database entry, for example. which only one process at a time can change. Okay, so if there are two processes trying to use this, say P1, P2, only one should be allowed. That is called mutual exclusion. We'll study that later when we study synchronization. So now our focus is on communication part. Okay, so there are a huge number of primitives available to you.
Sir, I have a doubt.
हाँ बोलिए.
Sir, every person have a view that is they have to choose the whole memory, na, from 000 to etc. So, sir, how come, sir, one process acknowledges that there can be other process also in this address?
Okay, that's exactly the technology is. I am happy that you understand the concept of address space now. Well, that's a very good question, and we will answer this, right? That's all the technology is all about. Okay, now, each process has an address space, and it wants to communicate with other process with a different address space. How can they do it? That's a very good question. We'll come to that. Just hold on. Huh? Okay. Okay, all right. So these are the primitives given in Linux, right? And you should now see system calls related to IPC or communication. Okay, you'll find all these, right? There's a concept of pipe, there's concept of FIFO, okay, which is nothing but named pipe. Then there is stream sockets, and these are all part of byte stream. Where you have byte stream available. Okay, then there is something related to message, like message passing. Okay, now understand the difference between byte stream and message passing. Message passing is very structured way, where there is a header and all this. Okay, or metadata area, which is usually header in the message, right? And then there are mechanisms like message queues, POSIX message queue or datagram socket. So we'll look at in message passing paradigm, we'll look only at the basic concept, which is here. Okay, and for these two, we'll look at pipe and FIFO. Okay, and when we study shared memory, we'll look at POSIX shared memory. Okay, all right. So this is about IPC, inter-process communication. Similarly, we have synchronization among the process, right? Well, like critical section part, we'll study at semaphore, we'll study mutex and condition variables, right? So only few, because even now for this basic course on OS, we are going to fairly, we are going into great amount of detail. Normally basic course don't cover, go into this level of details, right? But fortunately we have time, that because of the reasons I've just mentioned, because we can save 8 or 10 classes for memory management, etc. Right? So we'll go a little more detail. Okay, so inter-process communication. So there are two processes want to communicate with each other. What should be way? Okay, before that, let's see. Yes, let's look at scenario where IPC is required. Any application you have developed so far where IPC is required? We have developed multiple processes and then they need to communicate with each other. Any programming you have done, right? Every large system that you develop will have multiple processes, because these processes can run on multiple cores and multiple not only cores but multiple processes, and each processor contains multiple cores. Okay, any program that comes to your mind, any application rather? Okay, let's look at one of the application, that too at very top level, because we want to visualize what exactly happening, right? And why do we need it? This is your Google Chrome browser architecture. It's available at this website. Okay, and if you see there's a browser application and there are rendering engines. Okay, And these all of these, and each browser tab runs into separate process. Okay, because now there is, why do we want to run in separate process? Anyone? Each browser tab or each browser window that we open runs into different process.
We can have different websites running on.
Yeah, so
one is
that's,
running a YouTube video and
yeah, we do that because these are independent tasks, right? And then you may want to provide security. Protection is important, right? I mean, maybe one site is malicious. Okay, but the other browser window should be protected from that, right? So these are independent tasks in some sense, right? Okay, there's very little common things that's happening between browsing in one window and browsing in another window. Okay, or browser window tab, or all right. So you need to protect that. Hence, these are running into different processes, right? Okay, and then there is rendering engines. So you need to also protect, if there is a problem here, then it should not impact your browser. Okay, and one rendering engine must also be protected from other rendering engine because of security reasons. All right, so there's a reason we need multiple processes, and because of security or protection reason, but also for the performance enhancement perspective. All right. Okay, there's a possibility that all these things run into different cores. Okay, and then there is a need for communication among these. If these are the processes, independent processes, then they need to also communicate with each other. Okay, in the browser here, these are the two communication channels shown in blue, this one and the second. Okay, and what methodology that we use here is called named pipe or FIFO. We'll look at this little later. Okay. All right. And these pipes are used in asynchronous mode. We'll study synchronous and asynchronous mode, such that there is no blocking after sending. Okay, until so we'll look at this asynchronous synchronous modes a little later, but try to understand the concept of a large application design. If the domains are independent, domains of problem solving or tasks are independent, then they are run into different processes, and we need to create processes accordingly. Okay, all right. Now here is the question that you asked. Okay, if the process A wants to communicate with the process B and their address space are independent, how do we do it then? So there must be something in between, right? That can help. What can be in between? A simplest thinking, simplest way. We are not going into a complicated way. What should be in between? That has access to both.
So kernel stack.
Kernel.
Yeah. Right. Kernel has access to everything in system, right? Whole physical memory it has access to, and it knows where different processes are running. What are the address space of different processes? Where actually addresses are mapped. Okay. So we can have a kernel in between. So kernel can now facilitate this, all these communications. Okay, that's one way of communication between the processes. All right. There are large number of primitives or methods or approaches available for both communication and synchronization. Okay, that we will cover in this course, right? First, that we'll start with message passing, where one process passes message to other processes. Second important primitive is shared memory. Okay, how can they share memory? Two processes, how can they share memory? You know, I mean, again, the help of OS is required to allow one process area where that process is writing into that it wants to share with the other process. OS can simply, you know, do some tricks, right? What could be that trick? If you're using paging system, then you can see, you know, pages for both processes can map into same physical memory. If it's done with understanding of OS and processes, then there is no issue. Okay, so there are two mechanisms where first is, of course, a message is sent. Again, OS comes into play. We'll see how. And then a message is received and message is responded back, and this guy receives a message. Second is, as we said, shared memory. So both are depicted here. This is message passing here, then the shared memory. Okay, the process A wants to something, then it puts into message queue, and then process B reads it from the message queue, and so on. Okay, and shared memory, there is if this is the address space, and part of that space is for the kernel, and then kernel can allow some memory location to be shared across process A and process B. Okay, but I'm sorry, here is a view of physical memory, not really virtual address space. And however, something that process A can read will also be mapped into this part of the shared memory, so part of the virtual memory of or address space of process A is mapped into common area, common physical memory. Okay, so now who can do this? It's only OS can do this, right? So process has to make a request to OS with some system call to provide a shared memory, and OS can do that. Any question? Okay, let's go ahead, right? So now we will look at very basic concepts of message passing, and you will find it easy to understand because you have done networking course, right? So if you go to topmost level of application layer in networking, then these concepts are there. Like you know, for example, if you have done RPC or socket programming, exactly you will see these concepts, right? Okay. So when these are processes, not threads, then there is no sharing of address space. Okay, and this message passing, you know, can happen within a machine, but you know, you can also visualize that message passing is happening between two remote processes which are running on two different machines, and these two different machines can be anywhere in the world because there is an internet in between or network in between, so it doesn't matter, right? So essentially, message processing allows message communication between two processes. Okay, so there are very large number of flavors of message passing. We look at only at the very basic concepts. We will not go into great details of any of these methods. But something that IPC requires in general are two operations: send operation or send primitive, which has to specify destination. Now here we will have to specify destination process. Okay, and the message. Now message will of course have some format. Okay, and then receive. Now it means the process has to run receive primitive in order to receive a message, okay, from some source. Okay, what this is require? It requires first proper definition of what is source and destination address. And then processes. When we say processes are communicating, right? Even in networking that you do, is essentially two processes, two end are communicating. And it has to have a way to address it properly. Okay, how do you do it in case of networks? Have you ever thought about it?
IP address.
IP address is of course right. It does not define process address, right? Okay, I will leave it to you. Just think about it. Right? Try to combine two things. Note that only processes communicate with each other. Okay, this may be a browser process and client, and server process. So only communication is between processes, and these processes need to be named. Okay, IP address is address of a node. It's not address of a process, right? It's a machine address.
Process ID.
Okay, just think. I will leave it to you. There is always process ID. Good. Is process ID unique? How is it unique? So note that for any communication, even IP communication, right? That we normally, when we discuss networking, we think only in terms of machines. Okay, so very important condition for internet is that addressing has to be unique, and that was the beauty of internet, right? I mean the hierarchical addressing that was created is lovely. Okay, because addressing by itself must tell you where to route, something like that, right? But nevertheless, so first condition is addressing. If addressing is proper, it means every communicating node must be uniquely identified. Similarly, each process has to be properly identified. When one process in a machine is communicating with other process, some other machine, there must be a way to identify that. So I will please think about it, and you will come to the answer by yourself. Okay, so we use send primitive and receive primitive. Okay, or instruction you can think of, which has, now the number of parameters in this could be many, but simplest case is that minimum you need to define a destination. Okay, from where you want to send destination process, and then message, and then message is to be in proper format. All right. Similarly, source is to be defined, source address to be defined, so that receiving process knows from where it is getting. All right. Okay. Now there are various kinds of.
Sir, why sir destination source? Do we mean sir process ID or something?
Right now, let's to simplify our discussion, we are talking about process ID, source ID and destination process ID. Okay, we are thinking right now only in a machine communication. And you have done networking course, you can extend this logic to whatever you want to. That's the assignment that I have to you. You solve it by yourself. That's how process can be identified. Right now, when you source destination, we say it's just process ID. Okay. All right. So we are talking right now within a computer. Okay. Then there can be various kind of various ways this communication can happen. Synchronous versus asynchronous, and don't get confused with synchronous machine or asynchronous logic that you use in your computer architecture course. We studied synchronous logic versus asynchronous logic. We are not talking about all that here. Okay, when we say communication, it is synchronous versus asynchronous, which has different connotation. Will, of course, it finally goes into some kind of behavior pattern, or sometimes you can relate it to clocks. But in general, remember one thing: when a message goes from one end to another end, there is no common clock signal that goes from one machine to another machine. And whenever digital signal is to be read, you have to use clocks. Okay, so you possibly won't have studied it because you have not studied layer 2. There is a way to generate clock signal back, from basic, some flags are there in the beginning of a message, and then you generate from that clock, and then you interpret bits later on. Okay, we will not going to go there. Here we are talking about behavior of synchronous communication versus asynchronous. Then this is something called direct communication versus indirect communication. Please come to OS level, don't go into network level now. Okay, how are the link established? Can a link be used for more than 2 processes? Okay, and between a pair of processes, how many links can be there? Okay, what is the capacity of a link? What is the size of the message? It can be fixed or variable, and link can be unidirectional or bidirectional. Okay, all right. So we look at these one by one. So in general, basic message passing structure is that there is sending process, and then it creates a message and gives. Hello, can you please mute in case you don't have any question? And then there's a message passing primitive or module sends this message to other message passing module, and then passes on to receiving process. So it's simple. Okay, so right now we are talking about local versus distributed, talking largely about local. Okay, because process may reside in the same computer, or when it's in distributed system, then we only think that we need to discuss that how addressing happen, and secondly how message communicates. Okay, and later on, once we complete the basic message passing, then we'll look into remote procedure call if time permits. But my assumption is that you would have done this in networking course. Did you? Did you do this RPC? Did you study RPC in your networking course?
No, sir.
Yes or no?
No, sir.
Okay, all right.
No,
Then
sir.
we'll cover. That's fine. That's fine. Actually it comes under OS because little more detailed than what network. Usually we don't get into these details. We look at primarily at communication aspects, which is routing, switching, and so on. Okay, so let's look at synchronization aspects. Okay, so basically when we say synchronization here, we say that when a sender sends a message, okay, this sending process, say P1 or P. Now here is a primitive send. It creates a message and sends it to a destination. What happens then? Now it hands it over to other process, maybe OS or something, and goes to other process. Does it block after this, or does it continue operation? It sends a message and continue operation, or it may send and block until it's received. Okay, so so sending process is blocked until message is received, and sending process is not blocked until message. It means the sending process can send the message and continue. So there are two aspects, right? Okay, so this first is called blocking send. Okay, and of course there is a non-blocking send, and then there is a blocking receive. Similarly, at the other end, receiver blocks until the message is available. It means that it continuously looks for message, and once it receives a message and then moves over. Okay, so this is sending process is, so it's doing its operation, and then message operation happens. It runs this primitive send. Okay, it means that now it hands over to some other process or thread to execute, and that thread works or process works, and when it's available, when it when the receiver receives it, this process can continue. Okay, all right, so don't go into just overthinking that how this process will know that when to unblock. Then let's assume that there is OS that's taking responsibility to inform this process that now it can unblock. Right now we are not going to that level of detail. Now process thread is blocked until message primitive has been performed. It means that send is received by other end. Okay, so it means that sender may be blocked for very long time. Okay, what happens in the blocking receive? Blocking receive is much simpler. That receive process waits for a message, and when it comes, it unblocks itself. Okay, note that we are talking about primitive, we are not talking about protocols. Okay, similarly, we have non-blocking send, where sender sends a message and continues, and we have non-blocking receive. It means that when this receive primitive is executed, it just checks if there's a message, it copies it somewhere to a buffer or something, otherwise continues. Okay, all right, so these are the 4 primitives that we have: blocking send, blocking receive, non-blocking send, non-blocking receive, and any protocol that we develop will have combination of this. Okay, you can think now of even TCP or whatever protocol that you studied, or in Ethernet, CSM, ACD, etc., and you can find out whether it's what combinations are that, right? Now, what is more natural for sender? It is more natural not to be blocked after sending, after issuing a send, such that it can send multiple messages, right? For a receiver, it's more natural to be blocked after issuing a receive. So it's a receiving process running and say receive something. Okay, it's more natural for it to wait until message comes. Okay, however, it may, if there's a message doesn't come, it's a loss somewhere, then we'll block indefinitely. Okay, so we are not looking at the error conditions and so on and what will happen. That's part of the protocol that you have studied, right? But in general, these are the primitives, and based on that we can develop various methods. Okay, so we have various combination now. We have blocking send, blocking receive, non-blocking send, non-blocking receive, non-blocking send, and blocking receive, which is most popular one. Okay, so there is a server process, for example, is given. Server process, okay, which receives a request for say some service, some web page or something. Okay, and and then it needs it will need the expected information before this, and let's assume a server process handles this. This is a server process, so it has to now get a information from database or somewhere. So it will, until this information is available, this sender process, this process, server process will blocked. Only if it's received, then it will send it onwards, right? So most of many protocols use this non-blocking send and blocking receive. All right, and then there is, of course, when we say a link between two entities, this link we normally don't worry about, what is the buffering capacity. Okay, link is usually with in both ends of a link that you have studied in routing, I am sure. When you studied switch architecture, router architecture, each port of the router has buffers. Okay, so this link, when we say link capacity, actually we talk about, now we don't talk in general about the bandwidth of the link. Okay, which of course depends on a lot of things which you have studied already. But usually we talk about how much capacity we have at both ends. There is a possibility that there is a zero capacity. Okay, it means the sender must wait continuously for this, must wait for receiver. Okay, and receiver must wait for sender. And there can be limited number of buffers here. So limited number of message can be stored and received. And when this buffer is full, then sender cannot send. Okay, and when this buffer is empty, then receiver cannot receive anything from this. So these are the error conditions. Okay, or we can think of unbounded capacity or very large capacity, where we don't have to bound our problem or constrain our problem or processor assigning process to a limited number of messages. Okay, all right. Any question? Note that we are still talking about very high level primitives. We are not talking too much about what will happen in case of error and so on. So now you can use these primitives are available to you, like send and receive. You can use this in a process and experiment with that. Okay, all right, another 2 minutes and we'll close, or shall we stop now? Do you have a class after this?
No, sir.
Okay, so in that case, let me go ahead for another 5 minutes and then we'll stop. Okay, there can be direct communication or indirect communication. So direct communication is when a process 1, say process P1 is communicating with process P2. Okay, and then there's P1 and P2 are known right in the beginning. Okay, it means that P1 is communicating with P2. This P1 and P2 number has to be known, or address of that is to be known, or P1, P2 complete details are known, right? Or process ID is to be known. Is it the scenario all the time? Can you think of scenario where this is not possible? See, for example, suppose there is a printer, is a common printer, a department printer where all of you can print. Okay, so who is printing is not known right in the beginning, right? At the time of programming. Okay, it's a dynamic thing, right? So now you cannot, so this kind of mechanism where there's a direct communication or direct addressing will not work. Okay. Okay, and then other way is that we can create a common receiver with printer or mailbox, we'll say, and anybody can send a request to mailbox. Okay, this we call it indirect communication. Now this printer process will pick up job from this mailbox or message queue. Okay, and honor the request and execute the request, right? Okay, so this mailbox is viewed as an object in which messages can be placed by processes and from which message can be removed, right? It's like a mailbox that we have in front of our house. Nowadays we don't have, but we used to have. And then letters can come from anybody. And then we remove it one by one and we read it one by one in the order they have come. Okay. So it means that mailbox can receive messages from many sources, but it belongs to a process. Okay, in this example, right? It's like a port. Okay. So direct communication, of course, will require send and receive primitive. Okay, where we need to specify P, this is send it to destination. Okay, and then there's a message. This has to be in proper format. Similarly, receive it from a source queue and a message. So now a link is established automatically between pair of processes that want to communicate. Now this is responsibility of OS. How it wants to send it from P to Q. What we are talking right now, it's a very top level, because these are the primitives available to user processes. Okay, how OS is going to implement is left to OS. And if you are interested, we can go into details of Linux and see. All right, so in direct communication, link is associated exactly with one pair of communicating processes. And these processes are well defined. Okay, and second is, of course, we have studied is indirect communication, where there is a mailbox. And mailbox can receive messages, and in turn receiving process can read it from mailbox. And there are various combinations are possible, right? Now various protocols you can create, that how do we read it from mailbox. Whenever something comes from mailbox, if there is a light which blinks, which can tell me that a message has come, and so on and so forth, right? But note that when somebody is sending it to mailbox has got to a unique ID. So look at this way, even in US now, there are mailboxes, right? And you go to a department, and department have mailboxes corresponding to each user. Okay, and these mailboxes, each student, and these mailboxes are numbered. So if I had to send somebody to a student, I will just say mailbox number of university, that's it. Okay, so mailbox has a unique number. There's a unique, of course, to this process. Okay, so each mailbox has a number, unique ID. For example, POSIX message queues use integer value to identify a mailbox. Message queue is nothing but a mailbox. Okay. Now, processes can communicate only if they share a mailbox, obviously, right? So there's a various combinations possible. There is one process P1, and there's a mailbox, and there's another process P2. It's a one-to-one communication, right? So this is one configuration. This a mailbox is a private to both P1 and P2. All right. Okay. Now here we note that if process uses this primitive or the mailbox, then mailbox number is to be used rather than process ID. So we use mailbox number, which is a data structure. Mailbox, you think this is a data structure or a queue. And then similarly receive it from mailbox message, right? So send primitive will be look like this, and receive primitive will look similar to this one. Okay. All right. So it's very simple. You can read this through, if there are, okay. If there is a mailbox and then receiving it from P1 and P2, both are, and then is being received by process P3, how will P3 know that has come from P1 or P2? And okay, who is allowed to send if both are contending for a mailbox? Okay, so there are various again protocols possible. The round robin could be one. Here P1 is allowed, then P2 is allowed, then P1 allowed, P2 allowed. or there could be something else also. Okay. All right. And this mailbox sharing is possible in number of ways. First one, which we have already studied, is the mailbox is private between two processes, P1 and P2. Okay. Here, generally the mailbox ownership, who has this ownership? Mailbox, in natural way of looking at mailbox is that receiver has ownership of mailbox. Okay. So usually there is a mailbox in front of our homes. Okay, and we are the receiver. Okay, all right. Okay, or it could be shared by number of processes. Okay. Now, if there is a many-to-many relationship that many users processes or many processes can send the messages and many can receive it, there must be some way to find out who is sending for whom. Okay. Now, all right. So other thing is that when the mailbox is of this type, where there is one receiver receiving process, and usually this mailbox is associated with this receiving process. So this part of one system, and then there are multiple sending processes, say P1, P2, P3, whatever. Then this we call as a port. Okay, now think of port that you have studied in case of networking. Okay, so port is a mailbox that receives messages from many sources or many processes. And however, this port is usually owned and created by receiving process. All right, so that's all we have to cover today. Okay, these things please go through it by yourself. It's something that we have discussed just now. And then this message, now the message that we have been talking so far is not just bit of, I mean, it's not just a few bits, right? Or say 100 bits or something like that. There, when we say message, it has to have a structure. Okay, and it has to have metadata that we have seen, or control area or header area, right? So this is a header area which tells about what these contents are. Okay, and that anyway, I mean, so in Linux, when you are setting message queues, you'll find out there must be a particular way of formatting this message. Okay, so if you have a process has some data to send, this has to be put inside a message or block, and it has to have certain fields here. And you would have possibly, I'm sure you would have studied this in case of Ethernet and also in case of IP communication, because whole networking is based on this concept, right? Because this, what do you call that, header contains information about what is to be done with this data. Okay, like sequence numbering, priority, and what all right. So that's all. We have studied the concept of message passing at very high level. We have seen concept of blocking and non-blocking, which results into synchronous, asynchronous kind of communication. In general, synchronous communication is where there is a blocking send and blocking receive. Okay, in communication terminology. Okay, asynchronous is where is non-blocking, when send receive primitives are both non-blocking. They are not blocked after sending and receiving. Then we have seen the combination of that. And then we have seen when there is a link capacity, we call it a link capacity. Here we usually think in terms of buffering at both ends, buffers at both ends of the link, which can have zero capacity. If that is so, then sending and receiving process has to be proper such that there is no buffering of message. If there is a buffering, then of course sending and receiving can be of different type. Okay, and then we have seen there is a direct or indirect communication. Direct is where both processes have unique IDs, And indirect is where we use a mailbox. All right. And then we have seen a mailbox of type where there is only one receiver and multiple sender. Then we call it port. All right. So that's all. I'm sorry I took 10 extra minutes, but I wanted to finish this lecture. Okay. Any question?